Welcome, comrades, to another public... Don't do the Russian accent. Okay. Welcome, comrades, to another public broadcast of the Union of Socialist Safe Roads. You may be concerned that our plot to crush capitalism through making our streets safe for our kids to walk and cycle has been foiled by a plucky Lord Mayor of Brisbane.
I'm interested to understand how supportive are you of 30km/h speed limits in denser inner city neighbourhoods, and what additional evidence or information would you want to see in order to consider supporting the trial of generalised 30km/h speed limits for local and neighbourhood streets?
Never mind that 40Ks has been incredibly successful in improving the safety of the CBD, and the safety record has improved significantly. But when you hear a push for 30, what you're hearing, read between the lines, is they really hate motorists and they want to punish them and they want them out of their cars, which is Greens policy pretty much everywhere in the world. And so whether it's a socialist mayor like the socialist mayor in Paris or Greens councils elsewhere, it's a classic sign you've got a Greens council when they go for 30k limits. But I do not support 30k limits in the CBD. The 40k limit is appropriate. But look, you know, if you really hate motorists, then you go for 30. So I won't be supporting 30.
However, our plan is still strong. We shall prevail. Yeah, that was a bit weird, huh? Anyway, let's get on with the video. Unfortunately, the hyper-partisan nature of politics in Australia means when a perfectly reasonable question about lower speed limits that improve pedestrian safety is asked, the answer is not about the issue, but about the political ideology of the questioner and the questionee. So I don't think Lord Mayor Schrinner actually believes that lower speed limits are some car-hating socialist conspiracy. After all, 30km/h, or 20 miles per hour in countries that have yet to evolve to the metric system, is rapidly becoming the best practice speed limit in urban and suburban areas where through motor traffic is not a priority and pedestrian and cyclist activity is expected. But don't take my word for it. That's the advice of the World Health Organization and the United Nations, Transport for London, Great Auckland. These are rolling out all over the world, including London, Paris, Portland, Brisbane. Wait, what? Oh yeah. The University of Queensland has a 30km maximum speed limit. But 30km/h speed limits would just mean you could never get anywhere in time. You'd burn more fuel, emit more pollution, and really, if you get hit by a car at 30 or 50, it's gonna hurt, right? It's all nanny state rubbish, and the real problem is pedestrians on their phones, right? Wrong. But don't just take my word for it. These experts in public health, road safety and urban planning have busted the myths about 30km/h speed limits. Let me summarise. This is where someone tells you that if you get hit by a car at 30, it's still going to hurt, so why bother? The reality is that yes, being hit at 30km/h does hurt, and I'm going to demonstrate that shortly, but studies have shown that survivability changes remarkably. At 50km/h, if a pedestrian is hit by a motor vehicle, there is a 50% chance that person will be killed. At 30km/h, the risk drops to about 10%. 50%? 10%. That's bigger. Road trauma is the #1 cause of death in children under 14. That includes being hit by motor vehicles. Kids don't develop their risk awareness and ability to judge speed of approaching vehicles until well into their teens. But of course, seeing is believing. So, I have my stunt driver up there. She's going to get up to 30k/h, going to knock me over. There's only a 10% chance I'm going to die. So let's see how this goes. Helmet for safety. Alright, here he comes. You ready? We're ready. Don't be stupid, as if I'm going to do that. Come on. But let's just compare passing at 30 or 50km/h. It's not hard to see how being hit at 50 is going to cause a lot more damage, whether you're walking or on a bike. The argument from the Lord Mayor is that Brisbane has already dropped speed limits to 40 in the CBD and school zones are 40, and that's enough. But even at 40km/h, the risk of fatality is about 25%, 2.5 times more than at 30. Well, why not just make the speed limit 5km/h? Make us all go at walking pace, wouldn't that be safer? Well, no. From 30 kilometres per hour down to 0, the risk only declines very slightly, so there's not much benefit dropping lower. 30 kilometres per hour is basically the Goldilocks zone. And while the survivability improves greatly the slower you get hit, the best way to avoid injury and death is not to get hit at all. So how can drivers avoid hitting people? By stopping. At 30 kilometres per hour, including a 2-second reaction time, you can stop in about 21 metres. At 50 kilometres per hour, it's more like 40 metres. That little bit extra speed almost doubles how much distance you need to stop in time to avoid hitting that kid that just chased their ball out in front of you. Another advantage of driving at a lower speed is that, as a driver, you have a much wider field of view. At 50 kilometres per hour, your brain can only process so much visual information, so you're focused more on what's directly in front of you. What's on the periphery becomes almost invisible, which makes a mockery of road safety campaigns telling pedestrians to be seen just quietly. At 30 kilometres per hour or less, you can see far more. Maybe you'll spot that person about to cross the road, rather than being shocked when they're suddenly in front of you. So, 30 km per hour speed limits, reduce severity of crashes, reduce stopping distance, increase visibility, and reduce crashes occurring.
Does 30 km per hour make a difference? Yeah.
Look, if you took a straw poll of people who drive in Brisbane now if they would support 30 km per hour speed limits without any context, you're probably going to get a lot of reactive disapproval. The key point being context. The idea isn't to make every speed limit on every road 30, that wouldn't make any sense. However, a survey by the Heart Foundation focused on encouraging people to get more active and feel safe doing so found 64% of people supported lower speed limits, along with 67% who wanted more funding for walking and cycling infrastructure from governments. Go figure. Also importantly, in places where 20 miles per hour or 30 km per hour speed limits have been introduced and residents have been surveyed afterwards, people are overwhelmingly happy with it. National and local surveys in the UK show support at around 70% for 20 mile per hour streets. I know elected representatives constantly think about winning the next election, which typically needs over 50% of votes to win. 70% versus 50%, that's bigger! I have a shocking confession to make. I'm a cyclist, I own a car, and I drive a car. Like most people, I don't enjoy driving in the city, and so the last thing I do is advocate for something that would mean I'd be in my car a lot longer. First thing to point out about suggestions for 30 km per hour speed limits is that they would not apply everywhere. Nobody's about to drop the M1 speed limit to 30, okay? Although, maybe sometimes that'd be an upgrade.
When we're talking about 30 km an hour streets, we're talking about local and neighbourhood streets, like this one.
Cities like Brisbane have a road hierarchy. You have motorways, arterial roads, suburban roads and district roads. None of these would be 30 km per hour limited. At the bottom of the hierarchy are neighbourhood and local streets. These are the streets that connect houses to the nearest district road. They make up the vast bulk of roads in a city, but they only make up a very small distance on a typical car journey. The reality is that 30 km per hour speed limits on local and neighbourhood streets don't really make much difference. And I'm going to show you how. So let's drive from this street in Jindalee to the wondrous mecca of consumerist capitalism, Indooroopilly Shopping Centre. It's about a 7 km trip. Let's see how long we spend on each category of road. So this is the local and neighbourhood street. I'm going to drive as if the speed limit is 50 because that's what it is. Really hard to see past the grass up there.
parking. It's taken me 10 minutes to get here. Now try that same trip where we'll treat the local and neighbourhood streets as if they're 30. Let's see how much it affects my travel time. This is 30k an hour. So about 10 seconds extra for a 10-minute trip. Hardly worth worrying about, is it? Obviously, if you choose a route which bypasses more major roads to avoid traffic, in other words, rat running, you would find your trip takes a bit longer. Given councils like Brisbane are forever dealing with petitions begging for traffic calming to try and stop people rat running, it seems a move that would deter it, like 30km/h speed limits, might indeed be a vote winner. And given in peak times drivers would only dream of 30km/h speeds on some of Brisbane's congested roads, I think the myth that reducing the speed limit in local streets would add significant travel time is completely busted. That was basically the line of argument from the Lord Mayor.
When you hear a push for 30, what you're hearing, read between the lines, is they really hate motorists and they want to punish them and they want them out of their cars.
You know what?
But I ain't spending any time on it.
If you've got this far and you've heard that kids hit at 30km/h are 5 times less likely to die than at 50, you've understood it's on local streets and it has minimal effect on travel time. If you think that a measure that reduces risk of dying by a factor of 5 and all it requires you to drive a tiny bit slower is anti-motorist, then... But if you really care, the Royal Automobile Club of Western Australia supports 30km/h speed limits in safe active streets, school zones and local roads. Go figure. But of course, an automobile club would totally be anti-motorist, right? And by the way, the Lord Mayor made a good point.
I'd be interested to know why it's okay for children to benefit from a 40k/h limit, but other places deserve a lower limit. Aren't children our most vulnerable road users?
Excellent point, Lord Mayor. 30km/h speed limits aren't anti-motorist, they're pro-children. 40km/h in school zones isn't acceptable, it should be 30. Oh, hey anti-motorist guy, if you're still here, this is pretty much directed at you too. The people who say speed limits and speed cameras are just revenue raising, like speeding is inevitable and it's not actually making the road safer, yeah, no. Where 30km/h speed limits have been applied around the world, police haven't rolled out speed cameras to divvy out fines by the thousand, though they probably could. In Australia, it was only a couple of decades ago that the default speed limit was dropped from 60 to 50. Our local streets instantly dropped in speed limit, but there weren't radar traps everywhere on every local street. And isn't it interesting seeing the same kind of arguments we're making for 30 being made for 50 kilometres an hour back then in 2003? The reduction wasn't instant, but now 20 years on, people well and truly get it, and instances of actually exceeding the speed limit on local streets is generally pretty low. Driving too fast for the conditions? Well, that's another thing altogether, and something many drivers are very poor at judging, and is why a 30 km/h speed limit will help. Where 30 km/h streets have been implemented, observation is done to monitor what level of compliance there is, and indicate where street design changes might be necessary to improve that compliance, such as speed humps or curb build-outs to narrow the road. The objective is to slow vehicle movements down enough to improve perceived and real safety for residents. Many local streets you would struggle to get up to 50 km/h as it is, but if you are driving with the mindset of getting up to 50, then you will be going into corners and turns faster than if you're only trying to get to 30. This just feels way too fast. Driving at 30 in local streets is actually less stressful and feels more comfortable. There's less pressure to rush a turn and accelerate harshly, and it gives you more time to look and observe for other road users and makes turns feel more safe. It's not about hating on drivers or trying to tax us with fines. Maybe that's why the Lord Mayor called it socialism.
Maybe it's the red shirts with space for cycling makes them think we're socialists.
It's about making our streets safer and healthier, and encourage people of all ages to walk and cycle, and give our kids the opportunity to travel independently in their neighbourhood. Let's hope we can put the myths to bed and seriously consider this simple idea to help make our neighbourhoods better and give our kids the freedom to roam. And you can help make it happen. Talk to your neighbours. Chances are they get annoyed by people driving too fast in your street. Talk to your local councillor. The process to get a speed limit reduced ad hoc is really painstaking and expensive, but if they know you say yes to 30, then that starts the conversation. Talk to your state government MP about this issue and ask them to advocate to the main roads minister to trial reducing school zones to 30 km/h. And of course, if you have a candidate or party that's proposing lower speed limits in local streets, consider rewarding them with your vote. This shouldn't be a controversial topic. It's recognised as best practice and increasingly happening all around the world. There's no reason it shouldn't be happening in good old capitalist Brisbane.